Before we get going, what do you do in the UK when you're not slinging WCM code?
Well, there's little time for anything else, Jeff. Most of my time outside of Alfresco is spent with the family. I've got a wife and 4 children, which keep me entertained.
Oh my, yes, you're outnumbered.
Very much so. Yeah, all the children are daughters out, so I'm in a house full of women.
Oh dear. I mean, yeah. That's great.
It's okay. I mean, it's not too, don't get me wrong.
Very good. Well, so it looks like you have a few slides prepared here, so I'm going to turn it over to you and let you get going, and I might jump in here with some questions. On these tech talks, obviously, we like to keep them a little bit informal and interactive. So, again, everybody, just pop in with your questions as you have them, and let's give it to Brian. Take it away, Brian.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Okay, so Jeff's introduced me. So some of you will have seen me talk at the DevCon last year. Some of you will have used the forums and possibly will have interacted with me on the forums. There's quite a lot to go through today, actually. I was trying to work out how to filter it down and decided not to. So what we're going to go for initially is a quick demonstration of the Web Quick Start, just to set the context and make sure that those of you that haven't seen it yet understand what it is I'm talking about. And then we'll start delving into it in a little bit more detail. So I'll talk you through the model that's used in the Quick Start. Then I'll look at the features that are in the repository tier, and then I'll also look at the example web application that's delivered as part of Web Quick Start and show you how that hangs together as well. So the idea really is to give you an overview of how it works, which bits you can get in and fiddle with, and then you can go away and have a play yourself and build something with it. So, as I said, we're going to start with a demonstration of how it works. Okay, so hopefully what you're looking at now is an instance of Firefox on my machine. I've currently got a clean installation of 343 running on this machine. And so logging in as the admin user, I've got no sites currently, so I'm going to create a new share site. In this case, I'm going to call the site Finance. And the first thing I'm going to do is just change this site so I've got Web Quick Start running in it. So I customize the dashboard for this site, add a dashlet to it, the Web Quick Start Dashlet. Then OK. That gives me this area up at the top left here, the Web Quick Start Dashlet. In this case, I'm going to import one of the sample websites, which is the Finance website. So what that's actually doing is going and loading effectively a zip of content that's delivered as part of the Web Quick Start module. And it places it into the document library of my share site. So if I now go and have a look at that, I can see that I've got a top-level folder that's been created for me, the Alfresco Quick Start folder. Under there, I've got 2 websites, effectively. I've got the editorial version and I've got the live version of my sample site. If I have a look at the metadata on the editorial version of that, I can see various pieces of information, and included in there is the host name, which out of the box is just localhost, but obviously you change that to your particular system, and the host port, which by default is 8080. On my machine it's running on 8081, so I'll just change that. If I drill down into the editorial area, I can see that I've got a root section under there. That's equivalent to the home page, basically. And then underneath there, I've got another section called blog, one called news, another one called publications. Underneath news, I've got companies and global and markets. There are other folders. This one called collections we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later on. So effectively what we've got here is a tree structure of folders, and then inside the folders we've got assets, pieces of content as well. It's probably worth just having a quick look at, we've already had a look at the website metadata. So we've got the title of the website, a description of it, where it's located, so the host name, the host port, and the context, the bit of the path that sits at the beginning of the URL. And this particular one has been set to be an editorial site. If we come down and have a look at the root section, have a look at some of the metadata there, we've got information about how templates are created and renditions are created, and again I'll talk about all of those in more detail. So if we actually go and have a look at this website now, so if we open up another browser window and go and hit the URL WCMQS, then what we're looking at now is that website. So we're looking at the information that's been imported into the document library represented as a website. So along the top here we can see the structure of the sections that we saw in Share. So we've got the news section, the publication section, and the blog section. Underneath the news section we can see we've got 3 subsections: global economy, companies, and markets. And if we just quickly switch back to Share and go into the news folder, or the news section here, we can see the companies, global, and the markets subfolders. Back on the website, if I go and have a look at the news section, we can see that we've got a different template being used to render the landing page for the news section. If we come down and have a look at the global economy, similarly we've got a slightly different template there with an RSS feed being shown at the top there. Publications, again the landing page has got a different look to it. It's got some little thumbnails of some documents that are held in the publication section. If I go and click on one of those thumbnails, I see a preview, a view effectively of that document, so I don't need to go and download it, so I can actually just read it online. I've got a link there to go and download it if I want to do that as well. If I click on a particular asset, so an actual document, then 2 things you notice. First of all, I see that asset being rendered in the correct template, but I'm also asked to log into Alfresco. And that's because on this particular template, on this particular piece of content, I'm able to edit it online, just in this website if I want to. So I can, if I want to change this piece of content, and if I click on that little pencil icon, I get a form appear that allows me to go and edit this piece of content in the context of the website.
Brian, that's because you're on the editorial site, right?
This is because I'm on the editorial site, yeah. So if I was looking at the live site, if you remember, there was a little setting, a configuration setting on the editorial site that said, is editorial equals true? It's because that was set that I'm seeing the inline editor here.
Okay, great.
Okay, I've got a search functionality here, and that came back fairly quickly. So that's doing a live search. That's going through the website back to the Alfresco repository, executing the search, and then coming back with the results here. There's an example of one of the PDFs. So even though it's PDF, it's been indexed by Alfresco and therefore appears in the search. Something else to show you is if I go into the blog section here and click on one of these blogs, you can see that I've got the ability to leave a comment on this blog. Now if I come back to Share just quickly, one of the relatively new features in Share is the data lists feature. And as soon as you upload or import a website into Alfresco, you get a couple of data lists created for you, and one for each edition of the website. So one for the editorial and one for live in this case. So if I have a quick look at the editorial one, which is the one I'm browsing around at the moment, you can see I've got no feedback currently registered against that site. So if I come back to my site and I enter a comment on this particular blog post, okay, post that back. So where has that comment gone? What's actually happened is, again, it's gone through the website, it's gone into the repository, and it's been stored in this data list. So if I just refresh that list now, you can see that that comment that I've just added is now recorded here. It's got a link back to the asset that I was reading at the point where I commented. It's got the comment that I've posted, it's got my email address, and so on. Just staying on the topic of feeding back and actually user-generated content going back into the repository, I've also got a Contact Us page on this example website here. So again, similarly, if I leave a comment here, I don't really, but so again, that's sent that, and if we just refresh this visitor feedback, now you can see that there's two pieces of feedback, and importantly, you can see there are different types of feedback that's supported. So, and you can add in your own types of feedback as well. So in this case, a comment has been registered against an article, and a contact request has been requested as well. Now, the way that that feedback is handled is completely configurable. You can associate Java classes with the different types of feedback. In the case of a contact request, what we do out of the box is start a little workflow. So as soon as the contact request comes in, the processor for that kicks off a little workflow. So now what I should see, if I go back to my dashboard, in my list of tasks, in this case it's configured to automatically get routed through to the admin user, but that's configurable as well. You can see that I've got a task in my list to go and handle the contact request that's been sent through the website. So you're hooking in the workflow capability of Alfresco to your website. Okay, something else possibly that is worth looking at is I've got the ability in Alfresco to take a piece of content and add tags onto it. So if I go to, let's go to that blog article, in fact let's go to blog 1, so the ethical funds one. If I edit the metadata of that particular asset, one of the things I'm able to do is add some tags. At the moment there are none defined in the system, so I'm going to add a tag of blog, I'm going to add a tag of finance, and I'll leave it there. Okay, so if I set that and submit that change, then if I come back to the website, go and find the ethical funds article, which is that one linked off the home page there, then you can see at the bottom of that it's pulling out the tags that I've added in Share and displaying them on the website. Also, these are links, so if I click on one of those, what it's actually going to do is it carries out a search of the repository. So although I've only tagged one in this case, it's doing a search and finding, in this case, all of the articles that have got finance as a tag. So if I just go and quickly tag another one to prove that that's working. Our top analyst latest thoughts. So if we go to another one, tag. So if I use the finance tag on that one as well. And then if I come back and just click on that finance tag again, so you see there it's finding both of the ones I've tagged. Okay, something else that I'll show you is if I go into the news section and find a piece of news. So this one is in the global section, so News Global, Article 3, FTSE 100. So what I'm going to do in Share is find that folder. So it's in News and Global. I'm going to upload a new image into that section. Now the one I've got handy is one of a little koala. So I'll upload that. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is take that FTSE 100 rallies. So it's this article here, the FTSE 100 rallies from a 7-week low, and you can see it's got an image associated with it. It's in the global section, so if I look at it, if I look at the global economy section, I can see a thumbnail appear of that image. If I look at the article itself, I've got a slightly larger thumbnail. If I click on the image itself, it comes up with an even bigger version of that same image. So what I'm going to do is just change the image that Article 3 is looking at. So if I edit the metadata of that article, go to the full page, you can see here that there's an association to an image. I want to change that. So I'm going to remove that article, that image, and I'm going to go down and find the koala image, add it, save it, and then if I just come back to the website and refresh that page, then you can see it comes up with the koala bear there instead, and I get the different renditions, so different versions of that file, different versions of that image. So there's no HTML sizing going on here. These are coming out of the repository at the correct size. And again, if we just have a look at the thumbnail as well, there's a little thumbnail there as well. Okay, right, that was the demonstration. Now we'll switch back to the land of slides. And I'll go through what's going on behind that. And I'll talk first of all about the repository side of things and how it's modeled at the back end, and then I'm going to look at the website itself, which is implemented in this case as a surf application, and I'll talk through that.
Brian, before you get going, just one quick question so that it's clear to people. If you're looking at community or enterprise out of the box, you will not see the dashlet, that quick start dashlet that you showed. There's an quick start is basically distributed as an add-on, right? That needs to be installed as an additional step after you've installed either community or enterprise.
That's right, although with the installer for Enterprise, you can just tick a box when you're installing it and it will automatically install it for you. But it's delivered as a module, what we call an AMP, an Alfresco module, that you can add on to Alfresco if you want to use Web Quick Start.
Very good. So if you already have an installation, then what you need is the AMP. You can deploy the AMPs just like any other AMPs, and then you should be able to see the dashlets, and then you'll see this content model that you're about to take us through. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So this is a basic diagram that shows the model. Obviously, we're modeling a website in the repository. The items in green on the screen, those are the content types that relate to these particular concepts. So in the case of a website, there's a content type called WS:"website. A website has precisely one root section, and below there you can have any number of sections. So a section can contain any other number of other sections. A section can have 0 or more asset collections, and I'll talk about asset collections in more detail in a little while. A section also contains assets, and an asset may be related to any number of other assets. An asset can also have various renditions. So one example is the koala image is an asset. It has numerous renditions, one for each of the different size images that were generated for me. An asset, as we saw, can also have related visitor feedback. So we saw when I commented on the blog post, there was a link between the comment that I put in and the blog post itself. So as promised, asset collections. Basically, if you look at the little screenshots that I've got over on the right of this slide, you can see that on virtually every website, there are huge numbers of different collections of assets that are shown on different parts of the screen. So these two particular snapshots are just taken off the home page of the website, but there are numerous other examples of such things. And that's common, that's often the case on websites. So what we've done is model that as a specific concept, the asset collection. An asset collection just contains any group of assets, and you can have any number of them related to each section, and each one of them has got a unique identifier, a unique name within that section. There are two different types of asset collection. There's a static asset collection and a dynamic asset collection. A static asset collection is one in which the user of Share, the editor of the site, decides which assets are going to go into that collection, and they sort of create those associations between the collection and the assets themselves. So it's a sort of manual process. There's also the dynamic asset collection that allows someone to type in a query to search the repository for the assets that should go into that asset collection. Now that query is re-executed periodically, and the time between those re-executions are configurable. And you can write that query in either CMIS or Lucene query language. So if we just look at that in a bit more detail, here's an example of a form that's used to configure an asset collection. In this particular case, you can see that it has a query set on it, about halfway down that form. By setting that query, you're immediately making this a dynamic asset collection. If you didn't have a query, then it would be a static asset collection. And you can see that in this case, we've got a CMIS format query that periodically, in this case every 2 minutes, is going to run away, run that query, and then pick the top 3 results, that's the maximum size field there, and associate the top 3 results with this asset collection. There are placeholders that you can use. In particular, there's one that allows you to find an appropriate section. So in this case, if I just show you this query in a bit more detail. Okay, so there's that query. You can see there that there's a placeholder in there which has got the $section : /blog. So what this is actually doing is going away and finding all the assets that are in the blog section, anywhere below the blog section. And it's ordering it by creation date in descending order. And you can see that on this particular case, the top 3 of those, so the latest 3 blog posts, will be associated with this particular asset collection. And over on the right-hand side there, you can see various different ways that you can use that particular section placeholder. And that is actually a pluggable element. If you want to write your own placeholders, then you can do, and you can just plug them in and then make use of them in your asset collections. Something else that we saw is that the system can generate renditions, so alternative versions of assets. So in the example I gave, I uploaded an image of a koala, and then I saw that various different versions, different sizes of that picture were generated for me. And the renditions that are generated can be configured again on a section-by-section basis. So if I uploaded the koala image into one section, it might generate me 3 different renditions. If I uploaded it into a different section, it may generate a different set of renditions. So it's completely configurable on a section-by-section basis. It will, by default, inherit that configuration down the section tree. But again, you can turn that off if you want to, so you can break that inheritance. So in this particular example that I've got a little snapshot of here, there are 3 rendition definitions defined. So in this particular example, we've got 2 that are associated with the image content type. So if I upload an asset that is an image, then it will generate a small thumbnail and an image preview. And if I upload something that's of the PDF MIME type, then it will generate a flash preview of that. So the mappings can be done either on the content type or on the MIME type of the asset. And as you'd expect, you can plug in your own rendition definitions. There are a number in out of the box. You override this bean that I've got a snapshot of on the screen here, the rendition definitions bean, and you create your rendition definition. In this particular example on the screen, this is the small thumbnail rendition definition. You can see that it's in 2 steps. The first part is reformatting the image and it's converting it into a JPEG image. That's this bit here. Hopefully you can see my mouse. And then the second step is changing the size of it. So it's reducing, or well, it's setting it to be a 72 by 72 image. In this case, it's not maintaining the aspect ratio. And so you can define your own renditions in a similar way. So if you happen to want a 128 size image, then you can do that quite easily, or if you'd rather have a PNG format instead of a JPEG, that's fine. And you can use it for rendering Word documents into PDFs or PDFs into PNGs and so on.
Hey, Brian, before you go on, let me ask you a quick question. There's a question that's come through that's asking if when you showed your sort of logical model earlier, 3 slides back or however many slides back it was, The question is, are those relationships enforced and constrained by the model or any other mechanism? So I would imagine some of them are, like the relationship with renditions are defined with associations and things like that, but what about the relationship between, say, sections and assets or sections and collections and things like that?
Yes, they are enforced, if I'm understanding the word enforced correctly. Yeah, so a section can contain any number of assets. An asset actually, although I said is a content type, it isn't actually a content type. An asset is an aspect. So you can apply the asset aspect onto any piece of content you like. So
a section is really a folder, and in that folder,
a section is derived from folder. An asset is actually an aspect that you can add on to any piece of content. What else do we have in there? So an asset collection is also actually derived from a folder. There are various behaviors that are hooked onto these things. So, for example, when I create a section, so when I create a node that is of type WS section, then a behavior triggers that will automatically create me a landing page for that section. It will automatically create me the asset collection folder, and it will also create for me by default 3 standard asset collections, but again you can change those if you want to be your own asset collections. So there are things that are hooked onto these types, and I think probably the answer to the question is yes, those relationships are enforced in the model.
Okay, great. And I would just add that to the person that asked the question, if you want to look at the model yourself, obviously the source code is all available under, if you're looking in Alfresco community under root modules, there's a project called WCM Quick Start, and then WCM Quick Start module, and then you can drill down from there and find the model that way.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got a couple other questions queued up, but I think I will save them. Oh, well, here's one that's related to renditions, which we were just talking about, which is that the person is pointing out that content transformations are CPU intensive, and he's asking if they're synchronous or asynchronous, and if they are asynchronous, can the queue be monitored or manipulated?
Excellent question. They're asynchronous. But there's no administration of the queue for those.
Yep. Okay. Very good. And we'll save the rest as we progress. So I'll let you continue.
Okay. Right. So the next thing to look at is feedback. Obviously, I showed you comments for articles being sent in and also a contact request, but the chances are you'll want your own types of feedback to be pushed in. So that, as you might hope, is also extensible. You can add in, if you define a Java class that implements a particular interface, in this case the feedback processor handler, then you can associate your class with a feedback type. So if you remember, I pointed out that when I put in the comment for the blog post, it entered the data list with a feedback type of comment, and when I entered a contact request, it went into the data list with a feedback type of contact request. So those 2 different types triggered off 2 different processor handlers in the background. So if you wanted to hook in to sort of create a new type of feedback, or if you wanted to just change the way that one of the out-of-the-box types of feedback were handled, then you just write your own processor handler, and down at the bottom of this slide you can see how you would register your new Java class with the system and get it to associate the feedback type with your Java class. So in this particular example, you can see that I'm showing you the comment feedback processor handler, and the important bits are highlighted in red there. Something I didn't show you because I was conscious of time is the publishing mechanism. Basically, when you publish an asset in Web Quick Start, it jumps across from the editorial site that I showed you into the live site, which I mentioned it was alongside the editorial folder. So each one of those, the live site has got its own host name and port and web context, so it's got a different address, and you can, quite hard to explain, but by pointing your browser at the different host name, the host name that's used for the live website, you start looking into the same repository but into a different folder structure in that repository. So you see a different set of content that's been published from the editorial site. I can go into that in more detail if people want to hear more about it, but for the time being I'd like to press on to try and cover off a bit more of the actual website itself.
So, I mean, basically you can have an editorial site and a live site, and you could actually have additional steps in between. I know a lot of people have a QA or a test site.
Yeah, they chain together. So if I just quickly come back to share and have a look at it. Okay, so you can see at this level here I've got Quick Start Editorial and Quick Start Live. If I look at the metadata on the Quick Start Editorial, right down at the bottom of this form here, I've got the published target. In this particular case, I've got a published target of the Quick Start Live. So I can actually chain these. At the moment, I've got here 2 steps. I'm going from editorial to live. But if I wanted to put a QA step in between the 2, then I could do that. I could do that quite easily, just actually in this case, making a copy of the Quick Start Live folder, calling it Quick Start QA, and then just changing the linkage between them.
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay, something else you can do, this is relevant in particular if you are a systems integrator or you're taking Alfresco as a partner and you want to target particular markets yourself. If you want to add in your own website, a Web Quick Start website that you want to be able to demonstrate easily, you can generate your own ACP and plumb that in so that it appears in the Share Dashlet that I showed you. So out of the box you get 2, you get the government and the finance one. If you want to generate your own and plumb that in, then these are the areas you want. So the bean is the site import file locations that tells it where to find the ACP, and then there's a properties file that allows you to configure how that ties into your new ACP. Okay, so that was a whirlwind tour of what's going on at the repository layer. Now I'm just going to move on and have a look at what's happening in the website as this example. So this example is a website that's being built on using the Surf framework, but that in itself isn't hugely important. It's the API that you see at the sort of 4th box down on this slide is written in Java and is agnostic as to which delivery framework you're using. So although this one is Surf, and what I'll describe to you is this website, you don't have to use Surf if you don't want to. So the Quick Start API talks back to the repository. It uses a bit of a hybrid of CMIS and a bespoke web script-based REST API to talk back to the repository. and I'll just go and have a quick look at what that API is and how you might use it and how it's used in this particular example. Because I'm aware that on the forums I get a mix of questions really. Some of them are related to what's going on in the back-end repository, and some of them are related to what's happening in the website, the web application itself. So I'll try and cover a little bit of both. Okay, so top right of this slide you can see the same conceptual diagram that we saw before. This, at the bottom of this slide, you see a little snippet of code that uses the Quick Start API. So, and this particular snippet is showing you a little bit of the API that's around the website, the section, and the asset concepts, things that are highlighted in that diagram. So in this example, what we're doing is we're getting the website that's in the repository that's got a host of localhost and a port of 8080. We're then getting the section that is /news/global on that website, and then we're getting the asset that is called article1.html within that section, and then we're just going and getting all of the properties of that asset and printing them out to the console. Here's another more complicated example. This is showing you the rendition, the asset collection, and the visitor feedback. So again, won't go through this in too much detail, but basically what we're doing, we're going through, we're getting an asset collection called latest articles on the global news section from the previous example. We're getting all the assets that are in that asset collection, and for each one we're printing out the title, getting the actual content itself, and deciding, having a look to see whether it's an image piece of content and printing out its size and getting a rendition, the small thumbnail rendition of it. Then we're getting a page of feedback, so comments that are associated with that particular asset, and we're going through and we're just printing out all of the feedback that's been received that's related to this particular asset. And then right at the end there, we're posting a new piece of feedback that's related to that asset. So again, I'll leave it there. The slides will be available, so have a look through that at more leisure. And if you've got any questions about it, then I recommend you go onto the forums. There's a Web Quick Start forum in the developer section, which I'll point you at the end. I receive an email if anyone posts a question there, so if you've got any questions about any of this stuff, then just post questions there and I'll reply as soon as I can. The URLs in Web Quick Start, you may have noticed when I did the demo, they're all friendly URLs. You don't have any UUIDs or strange URLs being used. So in the middle of that slide you can see an example. The host name and indeed the port number as well is used to determine which website in the repository you're referencing. Then we look down the path to find the appropriate section that you're referencing, and then at the end, the very last bit is used to determine which asset in that section you're requesting. Well, when we've resolved that, so in the actual API that's resolving that, then places the website, the section, and the asset objects into the request context. So you can then use them as a template developer. You've got them available to you to start printing out stuff to the page. Once we've resolved the section and the asset, then we also go and try and find out how we should render it. Which template should we use to render this particular asset? And we do that by looking at the section configuration. So every section can configure which content types should be rendered by which template. So in this particular example on the right-hand side here, we can see, for example, any article that's in this section, this happens to be the root section, should be rendered using the template called article page 1. Now, you can override that lower down. So if you want a section, so for instance, if in the news global section I wanted to change it so that articles were rendered using a different template, then I could set the template mapping at that section to reference the different template. And again, hard to visualize, but when we're resolving, we find the asset, we find the sections, we find the type of the asset, we then try and find a match within that section for a template that's suitable for that type of content. If we can't find a match, we then look up to the parent section and we try and find a match at that level, and we keep on looking up until we either fail to find a template mapping which results in a 404, or we get to the top level here and there's a catch-all that says, okay, use this template by default. Now, I'll leave this one hanging for a little while, just so it's a description of when a request is received by the website, what objects get involved in handling that particular request, so which objects are used. I don't plan on talking through it, but it's there. Again, if on the forums you want to ask questions about it, then please do. Okay, so something else that I'm asked fairly frequently on the forums is, how does this website sort of work? Where are the components? If I want to change this bit here on this page, where would I find the right file to do that? So I'll just try and quickly whiz through that. So this is the webinf folder of the example website. The subfolders that we're going to be looking at here are pages, templates, and web scripts. So so a template in surf terminology is like a layout. It's like a piece of HTML that has got holes cut in it, and those holes have nothing in it at all. Those holes are called regions in surf. In the web scripts folder, we have components. Components are fragments of HTML that can be inserted into those holes. So you can insert a component into a region that's defined on a template. A page is the thing that wires that all together. So a page specifies which template should be used, which layout should be used, and then defines for each region which component should be placed into that region. Okay, so we'll just quickly go through those. So first of all, we're going to have a look in the templates folder. So the templates are the layouts. They're the piece of HTML that has got holes cut in them. And there are a number of them here that have got different purposes. The one we're going to be looking at in more detail is the one called 5-block, which is the layout that's used for the home page. So different layouts are used for the articles and the different landing pages as well. Inside the components folder, the web scripts folder, which contains the components, you can see there are far more things. So there are lots of different components in this website. So if, for instance, we want to go and have a look at the components that are used to render articles, then if we open up the article folder, you can see there are two different components here. There's style 1 and there's style 2. So two different ways that we can render articles, two different components that render articles. And finally, if we go and have a look at the pages, so these are the different ways of wiring those together, so different templates with different components hooked into it. These are the pages that are referenced from the template mappings within Share. So in each section, each content type can be associated with different pages. So article page 1 you see as the second item in that folder. That's the one that by default is associated with assets of type article. So if we have a look at the home page here, this is just a snapshot of what it looks like. And this is the XML that defines that page, that layout. So here we can see that we're actually referring to the template instance 5 block. So 5 block is the layout that we're using. And then we've got a list of components. So which components are going into which regions. So if we just go and have a look at the 5 block template first of all. So this is 5 block. You can see here it's just basically a few divs. It's just a little frame of HTML that's got holes cut in it, and the holes are identified by the region tag here. So you've got a region at the top there called belly band, and then we've got regions, left 1, left 2, left 3, a couple more regions, bottom left, bottom right, and some regions down on the right hand side, right 1, right 2, right 3. Okay, so really simple stuff.
So can you create new templates?
Yeah, absolutely. So okay. we deliver some out of the box, which are the ones that we use on this example, but what I'm trying to explain here is how, if you want to create your own, how you can take the existing ones and change them for your purpose. So here, this is the home page again, but I've just highlighted the different regions. So the belly band, left 1, right 1, bottom left, bottom right, that's where they correspond on this page. So now if we go back and have a look at that home page page definition, we can see that we've got the component mapping. So if we have a look at this one here, in the left 1 region, we want to put a wide list component. It's got the URL /list/wide. That's the location of the component that's going to go into the left 1 region. And in this particular case, we're also passing it some information about which asset collection should be rendered by that component. So if we go and have a look at that component, the list wide component, made it bigger for you. So that list wide component has 2 parts, a control. So each component is like a little MVC component. So it's got a controller that, in this particular case, up at the top here, is pulling out all of the articles from the asset collection that was identified in the configuration. So news.top in this case, and then it has, in this case, free marker that just renders that component. So this was the component that was in the left section of the home page. You can see in this particular case what we're doing is just going through all of the assets in the asset collection, rendering a thumbnail image if it has one, a small thumbnail image for each asset if it has one, and then the snippet of including the published time of it and the title of it. So that is that area of the home page. And that is all I wanted to say. Now I realise it was a whirlwind tour. There's a lot to cover, and I tried to some breadth. Hopefully I've got sufficient depth, but are there any other questions?
Yeah, so we've had a few questions come through. And one, I think, is we can probably knock out a couple of these at once, which is about architecture in general. So you know, I think it's important to point out that this is sitting on top of the DM repo, not the sort of old AVM repository. So all the content lives in the core Alfresco DM repository.
Yeah, that's the success we share.
What's that?
And that's why we can access it using the share application.
Yes, exactly. And the other thing is that somebody had asked if they could use Quick Start as a standalone without the repository, and the answer is that no. You know, all the content lives in the repository, so you do have to have the repository server running. Then you'll use the Share web app as your sort of content editor, content manager interface, and then you could use the Quick Start, the Spring Surf app that Brian was just taking us through. The other thing is that somebody had asked, do you need Surf? And the answer is no. You don't need to use Surf. If you wanted to just use the content model and the Share UI for editing that data, you could then use any front end that you wanted to access that data. You could, if, for example, when I was doing consulting, I had a client that was interested in using, I think they were using Spring MVC and Tiles as their app, and then they were using bits and pieces of the Quick Start API to fetch data out of the repository. So you don't need to use Surf. It's just that Brian and the team have created this this Spring Surf app as a great head start for people that might you know, lean that way. Do you want to add anything to that, Brian? Or?
No, I mean that's a good summary. The piece that was the Web Quick Start API that I was talking through is obviously written in Java, so lends itself very well to anything sitting above it that's also written in Java. But the way it's talking back to Alfresco is via RESTful APIs only. So there's no reason why you couldn't take the way the actual model in the repository and pull that out into a PHP application if you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. The other question that's come in is one that you get all the time, I know, which is about publishing to file systems. And I know in the version that you're showing right now, I don't think there is a publish to file system option. But do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, the Quick Start is expressly designed to be what's called a fried delivery system, or a coupled delivery system. So it's intended to be coupled to the repository at delivery time. And that was quite a conscious decision. It's no different really from having a database backing your website. And it was intended to show how the Alfresco content platform can be used to deliver web content management solutions. So the Quick Start is intended to be a showcase effectively for Alfresco functionality. So the Quick Start itself will always require a repository behind it. But the transfer service, which is what's used under the covers to do the publishing, at the moment, the transfer service can push from one repository to another repository. Within the Swift project, which is coming to a close quite soon, so this is the next major release of Alfresco, the transfer service is going to be able to push assets out to a file system as well as to another repository. So although not strictly related directly to Web Quick Start, it may be of interest to the person who's asked that question.
Yeah, and you can also, I mean, I think what's cool about this architecture is that you could, as you're doing in the demo, you're running everything on a single host. but you could run the repository on one host, your share editorial site, or the content management piece on another host, and then your editorial site and your live site and your QA site could all be on 3 separate hosts if you needed to set it up that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I'd strongly recommend that that was the case. And you can obviously cluster the repository and put load balancer in front. And yeah, you can make quite a sophisticated setup should you want to.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. So we've talked about architecture. Let me see if we have any other similar questions on the architecture. One follow-up is coming in, and hopefully we just answered that question. But the follow-up is: does the Quick Start app and the DM repo have to run within the same server? And the answer is no. This can totally be split out.
Yeah. So in fact, in my particular case, they're not running in the same instance of Tomcat. They're obviously on the same machine, but they're in 2 different Tomcats.
Yep. So Brian, you sort of mentioned that this is a fried, which is it's a funny term, but it's kind of common in the industry, fried versus baked and things like that. But it's fried, or it's coupled, or basically it's dynamic in the sense that the content gets merged with its presentation at render time. What is sort of the reason why Alfresco thought it was important to build a system that is a coupled system like that? Do you feel like this is the way the industry has moved, and really you don't see static sites being used that much anymore, or what's your opinion on that?
I think what you're seeing more and more is a kind of a hybrid solution where you may find images and binary assets getting pushed out onto web servers, or just generally made available outside of the core web application that has got the user-generated content in it. It's got far more dynamic facilities. So when someone posts a comment, you want it to appear straight away. You don't want to have to go through some publishing mechanism. So you generally find that websites are hybrid solutions. Some bits of the page that you see have been dynamically generated, and some bits have been statically generated. And that's exactly what Web Quick Start is sort of aimed at. And especially once you put in place the file system transfer that's available in Swift, so you can manage your images and binary assets outside and push them to a file server somewhere else, and then just reference them from your pages in Quick Start. So I don't think it's any longer the case that you're purely static or you're purely dynamic. Quick Start is targeting the quick turnaround editorial, so you've got dynamic editing of the content that we saw there with the inline editing that you don't really get if you're going through a static publishing mechanism. And you've got the ability to push your user-generated content back into the repository, trigger off workflows based on that user-generated content, and so on.
Yep. What about, and this, I don't know, we're already over, and I apologize to everybody that we've run over a little bit, but thanks for sticking around. So we'll take a couple more questions, and then I have a couple of plugs, and then we'll close it off. But so this question may be more complex than we have time for, Brian. But how does multilingual come in to Quick Start? Does Quick Start support multilingual websites?
Not yet, but again, in the next major release, we are introducing multilingual support in Quick Start. So you'll be able to take entire section structures and translate them or individual assets and just translate them, and on each request it will determine which language you want to view the site in, and will take you to the right place and show you the right content. So all of the furniture as well. So for instance, show you there. So I think I just clicked the wrong button. Press the wrong button. It's a terrible thing. Right, so all of the text here, so for instance the little search that appears there is all localized, and yeah, it's hard to explain without actually, if I open up another window, taken me off piste. Okay, so this is the public wiki, and this is the Web Quick Start page on the public wiki. See down here there's a link, the fourth link on that page, which is in draft. It's something I added just a few weeks ago, which is talking directly to this question. So if we go on there, you can see some sneak previews of what the user interface is going to look like to support multilingual websites.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Very cool. So let me get a couple of plugs out here for DevCon. You'll actually be speaking at DevCon. You have two sessions. One is on the WCM platform, and the other one is on the social publishing framework. Yep. So if you are attending and you want to hear Brian speak in person, either in San Diego on the October 26th and 27th, or in London, November 9th and 10th, Brian will be speaking at both of those events. Also, we have a real-world case study on a couple of Web Quick Start implementations. Michael McCarthy from TriBloom will be doing a session on that at the San Diego event. So definitely have more Web Quick Start goodness to share at DevCon. And then if WCM is your interest area, but maybe Quick Start isn't your thing, we'll also have sessions on LifeRay, Drupal, and we have a few other sessions in the WCM track. So definitely plan to come to DevCon. Early bird registration ends September 16th, so you have a little bit of time in order to save some money to get out there and get your registration done. And I believe Max is sharing her registration links right now. So I think this is all we have time for today. I do appreciate everybody attending and sharing a little bit of your morning or afternoon or evening with us. And I look forward to seeing you again next month, October 5th, for Tech Talk Live. And Max, I believe we're talking about transformers and behaviors, or what are we talking about October 5th?
Yeah, it's content transformers and metadata extractors.
Transformers and extractors, cool. All right, very good.
Yeah.
So you should be able to register now for that page, and we will see everybody again next month. Thanks, Brian, for participating. That was a good talk.
You're welcome. Thanks.